Okay, so I really am not a big fan of big collection videos and that kind of thing. I am always a little worried about presenting like I'm gloating about what I have. But today I wanted to address a knife or a blade philosophy video. Basically, what I want to cover for is my experience and how I determine what the purpose of various different knives are. Part of this is research, and part of this is my own personal experience. Although and I hope you will enjoy too. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different knives. Hoping this won't be super long, but based on what we have in front of us, I think it could be. So I hope you will stick around. I hope you will enjoy it. Please consider liking and subscribing. And yeah, let's get to it. So I already filmed this once, but I decided I'd do it again because it got a little rambly. And I just want to kind of clarify what my knife philosophy is, if you will. In way I see it, there's really three different types of blades that you can carry, and this kind of extends to much bigger blades as well. There are utility-based knives. They're usually smaller, and they do fine tasks, maybe everyday tasks, wood carving, that kind of thing. Then there's food prep knives, which are usually between 4 and 7 inches long, very, very slicey. And then we have what you like to call ultra heavy use. And those are, in many cases, and for a long time, have been axes, something like this bad boy. You get my point. It's something very serious. It'll do chopping, it'll do some heavy duty work. So, what are we here to talk about? So what just want to kind of briefly talk about is how they kind of work together and some discoveries I found along the way. So first of all, let's start with the smaller utility style blades. Now in front of you, these three knives here have three different shapes. This is the Wharncliffe, the Sheep's Foot, and the Tanto. And what I have found in my experience is that small blades using these three blade shapes seems to be the most effective because they have tips that are really good for draw cutting and doing fine detailed work, especially the Wharncliffe and the Sheep's Foot. Now, the interesting thing about the Tanto, and this is sort of a bit of surprise, and I only discovered this because of my experience with the Oni, is that the relief edge provided by a Tanto is still very, very good for draw cutting. But on top of that, you get this incredibly stout tip, like you would with most any other Tanto. So I think Tanto knives are actually fantastic for utility style tasks where you think draw cutting is going to be a common occurrence. And so they pair very well with the larger blades because of that draw cutting capability, something that a nice slicey blade like the Voyager doesn't have. So I really like that, and I think that as far as small knives are concerned, that's the only variety that I'm really interested in. It has to be able to do draw cutting very easily. So Tanto, Wharncliffe, Sheep's Foot, they're all really, really good at this task. Now, we're going to go to the other end of the spectrum here for a second and talk about the larger blades. So two of my favorite food prep knives are the Voyager and the Spidey Chef. Now, Spidey Chef is about as small as I would clarify as a food prep folding knife. This is like 3.3 inches in cutting edge, and actually is not as much different as you might think from the 4-inch Voyager. And I think that's because they're counting this to there is the 4 inches. But generally, the way I clarify that is it has to be able to slice an apple in half cleanly. That's really kind of the length that I think about. Now, apples around in Pennsylvania are huge, so maybe that's not a fair comparison. But yeah, they need to be able to slice an apple in half. That's kind of how I clarify it. And generally, these are best served as flat grind knives. And this shouldn't surprise you because most chef's knives are all flat grinds. And these two in particular, I've used quite a bit for exactly that purpose, which is food prep. And I do carry them from time to time. I tend to use them even when I'm preparing food in the morning, mostly to kind of keep myself aware of their usability and getting used to them. but also because I feel like, well, if I'm not going to actually use a knife, then I shouldn't be carrying said knife. So I do use them for food prep. And when it comes to that, I've pretty much been carrying the Spidey Chef ever since because of the premium LC200N nearly corrosive proof steel, I should say, as well as an all titanium hardware that never gets jammed up. In fact, I'm going to put that in my pocket right now. Now, there's some other knives here on the table, and let's start again talking about the heavy duty knives. So we have, of course, this is the Axis, which is not really a knife. In fact, I'm not even sure what this is, what you want to call it, but it's definitely an interesting tool we'll be talking about a lot more next year. But the SR1 is the knife I usually go to, and I have no idea what I'm going to be tackling. I'm going outdoors, and I'm not feeling like I'm going to carry a fixed blade, but I want a fixed blade. And that's what this is. This is a folding fixed blade. And I know a lot of people out there with their fixed blades are like, oh, that can't handle the fixed blade stuff. Okay, fine. You pick a task that is for a 4-inch knife. You have a 4-inch blade, and you find me something this can't do. Please, I'm serious about this. Find me something that you would do with a 4-inch fixed blade that this will not be able to do. And I'm going to guess there isn't any. I'm telling you, there isn't. I mean, I guess if you jam this into a log and then try to stand on it, fine, but that's not something you're doing with a knife. That's something you're doing to be an idiot. All right? So my knife still stands. Find me something this can't do that a 4-inch blade can do. I'm waiting. I still haven't heard anything. And until then, I'm going to claim that it is, in fact, a 4-inch folding fixed blade. Now, in front of me here, what I have remaining is actually the most interesting category of knives. And the reason they're so interesting to me is that they fall into this 2.5 to 3, just over 3-inch range. So, of course, we have one that's very familiar. This is the Benchmade 940. Okay, and this is just over 3 inches. It's actually a really nice blade length and shape. Very, very nice knife. Been around for a while, well loved. And this is a great one and done knife. It's one and done because it's just like, I think this 3.25 inches. So it really just about gets there to do almost all of the utility and food prep style tasks. It's just long enough, as is something like the full-size peasant knife. You can see they're very similar in length. However, these are all curved at the end, which, don't get me wrong, you could still use for utility tasks as you can with any knife, but it's a little bit easier when the belly is shallower or even completely gone, like in the case of a Wharncliffe blade. Okay? So I think these are great sizes to carry kind of if you don't know what you're going to be facing. So between there, we have like real true utility knives on Multitools, which is where this is the knife blade I like to have on my Multitools. So let's throw that out there. So we have, utility blade, more utility blade shapes on the Multitools, but also we tend to also have this once again the same size, kind of similar sized blades that we get on Multitools as well. So this is kind of that one and done blade size. It's kind of just big enough to do food prep stuff, and it's not so big that the tip becomes unwieldy. Yeah, that's kind of where it is. All right. Same thing goes with like the smaller micro peasant. I mean, it's the same basic gist, right? And that is a great blade size, which is why you're seeing so many knives in about that range. But for me, they are at its core, those blade sizes are really multifunctional blades, right? They're not good at any one task per se, but they're very, very well rounded. And that's a very comfortable size. If you are a person who carries only a single knife, that's a great size because it's small enough to control really well, but yet it's big enough to accomplish, some tasks. And I do think that the 3.15 or whatever this happens to be is about perfect as far as like being a middle ground, one and done kind of knife. It really does have the right size. And I do think that, when we pull it out again, the Spidey Chef is not that dissimilar in blade length. I think it's a little bit longer, but very, very similar. So these are very much good one and done knives. Now, unlike the Benchmade, the Spidey Chef has a little bit better time when it comes to the food prep stuff. I've used it and love it, and it's great. But mostly I'm not doing that with my folding knives. So for me, the reason I end up carrying first and foremost a multi-tool is the blade that's usually on there functions very, very well for everyday carry kind of utility tasks, right? Whatever I'm happening to be tackling at the time. So when I carry this, usually my very first like grab is something along these lines. Is a large, very, very large folding knife. Not because I like I want to attack somebody with a big machete. It's because they complement the smaller utility sized blades really well, right? They give you that nice, long, sweeping, full belly blade. And that is pretty much why I end up carrying something along these lines. Or something with like this plus like a utility knife. Even something like this, what I mean by utility knife, it could just as easily be something like a Gil-Tech Rock or the Attila Bob, same thing, right? So we have utility blade plus slicey blade. That's kind of how I plan on my blades, and that's usually what I'm carrying throughout the day. I usually have two knives, and they cover those two purposes. So there you go. That's my philosophy. That's how I figure it. And if I am going to go with one size, I usually pick something in this range. And actually, if I'm being honest, the 940 has a fantastic shape for this because it's almost a sheep's foot, but it's not exactly a sheep's foot. So I really, really like this blade shape. And if a lot of times I could just get away with this, just a single multi-tool to cover that multi-purpose functionality. And when I carry this, I don't have to worry about the other knives. And if I do, I can always carry a fixed blade in my bag or something like that, something a little bit bigger. But yeah, that's kind of it. I'm sure I rambled on a bit much here. Maybe you've never carried knives and you don't know where to go because there are so many. Maybe this is helpful to you. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Did this help you in any way? Was this just me being nuts, crazy, and rambling on for no important reason? So I hope you will let me know.